Okay, I think we've got this working. So our first PowerPoint is chemistry of living cells. This will be a review mainly of some biological and chemistry principles that you should already know. So hopefully you've had at least biology. If you haven't had biology yet, it is not a prerequisite to take this class, but you really need to get biology under your belt in your credits. So if you're not taking it along with this course or haven't taken it yet, email me ASAP. Let's get you into biology, okay? Other than that, you might have already taken chemistry, and now this is just kind of a fun science class after chemistry. So here we go with a review. The first question for you is, what are you made of? What are you made of? And you might be thinking of cells, yep, cells and stuff, but even down to smaller than that. You are made of, here's our first science joke, matter. Unless you multiply yourself by the speed of light squared, and then you energy. That's a really science nerdy joke. So, you know, E equals mc squared, and then if you rearrange that, you've got the m equals the E divided by square root of light. So there you go. You are made of matter. Anything that takes up space and has mass is considered matter. Anything that living is consistent of matter, and all known matter is divided into 118 elements. You know these. We've got these easily identified in a 2D form on the periodic table of elements. That's where you can find those 118 elements, okay? So the element is a pure substance that cannot be broken down into any other substance, okay? Each element has a particular set of properties that, taken together, distinguish it from all other elements. So there are certain things that these elements have that make them different. And if you just look at this right now, you can see right off the bat, looking at it, there's three different things that these are all different with, right? Color. So color is a property of elements. Another thing would be the strength, you know, how bendable it is or how stiff it is. So that's another property. Think back to flammability. Does it burn? And then at what temperature does it burn? Okay, so these are all different properties that make those elements different from each other. So if you have a piece of gold, you think you have gold, you can test it. And you can look and see what the properties of gold. If it hits all those same properties, then you have gold, right? Another one of that is mass and weight, right? So that's one way you know what elements you have. What elements make up the human body? So if you think back at that periodic table, what are the elements that make up the human body? We've got the most is oxygen. About 65% of your body mass is oxygen, and it's not in the form of like the oxygen that we breathe. Okay, most of that oxygen in us is in the form of water that's combined with hydrogen. The second most element is carbon at 18%, hydrogen 10%, nitrogen 3%, calcium 1.5%, phosphorus 1%, and then so on into smaller ones that barely make up even 1%. So oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. Remember those big four. A compound is two or more elements combined chemically in a certain ratio. For example, much of the oxygen and hydrogen in your body is combined into the chemical compound water, or H2O. Here's a cute little diagram to show you. As a newborn, you actually have about 80% water, and as you grow older and older, that percentage goes down. So seniors have 50 to 55% of water. An atom is the smallest particle of an element that still has the properties of that element. Atoms are extremely small. So this is the tiniest bit of an element that still means it's an element, okay? They can only be observed under an electron microscope. And the electron microscope wasn't discovered until 1931. So it's pretty cool to think that even just, 90 years ago, they invented this where we could actually see atoms and see the smallest point. So it's pretty amazing how much we've come to know in just the last 90 years. An atom has a central nucleus that is positive in charge. That nucleus then is surrounded by negatively charged particles called electrons. So you've got the positive nucleus in the center, and then all these negative electrons surrounding it in all different ways. So, you know, the way for us to imagine this, you see it written on paper, and it looks like a really cool 2D image there, but you got to remember this is all 3D, and things are happening all at the same time around it in like a little ball, and we're talking that you can't even see it, it's so small, and it's happening. So a molecule is the smallest particle of a compound that still has the properties of that compound. So you could have a molecule of water, two H's, H2, and then O, one O, okay? So that is one molecule of water. And then you can get tons of molecules of water together, and then you have a lot of water. A molecule consists of two or more elements. So, for example, water consists of two atoms of hydrogen, one atom of oxygen. That's why the chemical formula for water is H2O. And the O without a number next to it just implies, or if you see that in a formula, that it's just one of those, okay? We don't put an O1. A biochemical compound is always carbon-based, okay? It's a compound that is found in living things, and they are so that it has a carbon in there somewhere. One of the elements is carbon. So besides water, most of the other compounds are biochemical. Carbon has the ability to form stable compounds. The importance for that is an unstable compound, if you can remember in chemistry or what you've learned before, is an unstable form can be volatile, so it can explode. So very important that we don't have these in our bodies, right? We don't want to be having exploding cells and things everywhere. So carbon forms stable compounds. Each atom, of carbon can form 4 chemical bonds with other atoms, okay, or other carbons. So remember that special, it's number 4. So a chemical bond is a sharing of electrons that holds atoms together. A carbon atom can bond with other carbon atoms or with atoms of other molecules. All biochemical compounds are called polymers. If you remember the root word polymer from maybe before, poly means many. So polymers are many compounds put together, okay? Polymers, a large molecule that are made of many small repeating monomers, mono means one, of those small molecules. So on this diagram, you can see there's a monomer, and then when you start putting them together, you start getting the polymers. Most biochemical compounds are macromolecules. Macro means huge, micro means small. So these are mostly macromolecules. And the largest known macromolecule has 34,000 monomers, and that is DNA. So 34,000 monomers. Crazy to think about how extensive that is. Biochemical compounds make up cells and tissues and are extremely important in all of life processes. So think of things that your living things do to stay alive, right? Breathing, somehow, you know, especially animals, we're taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. Biochemical compounds make up those cells and tissues that allows for that to happen. Okay. Energy, bringing in food and changing those into a form that our body can use. All important things that these biochemical compounds do for our body. There are millions of biochemical compounds that are grouped into 4 main classes, and I'm sure you've heard of these. We've got carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So let's start with carbs first. Carbohydrates are sugars, starches, glycogen, and cellulose. Your body breaks them down for energy. So here's an example of a whole bunch of carbs here. We've got pasta, breads, rice is really high in carbs. Potatoes, carbs. We do find carbs in some nuts, beans and grains, so oatmeals and barley, other type grains. And then we also do find some carbs in fruits, and some fruits are higher in carbs than others. The more of the sweeter fruits will have more carbs in them, and our body breaks them down for energy, okay? Carbs are the most abundant biochemical compound found in the cell walls of plants. Sugars are simple carbs with small molecules. Example of that would be glucose. And then starches and cellulose are complex carbs. They are made of hundreds of monomers, okay? So they'd have tons of these glucose monomers put together to make starches and cellulose. Lipids store energies and make membranes. So we're going on to the next group. Lipids store energy and make membranes. You might think of these as the fats, okay? We've got some good fats and bad fats. Avocados are filled with fats, nuts, fish, vegetable oils, okay? So here are some examples to fill in on your notes. Fats are solid lipids that animals use to store energy. Remember that we're storing energy in these fats. Example of that would be the fat in meat. And it, like if you get a steak and it has that marble look in it, the white in between, and which makes it so good when you cook it on the grill, right? So that's actually fat mixed in there with the meat. Oils are liquid lipids that plants use to store energy. Okay, so the oils are for plants, and the fats are the solids in animals. Examples of that would be cooking oil or vegetable oil, corn oil. Okay. And then we've got phospholipids. These contain the element phosphorus. So if there's a phospho something in with it, it is a phospholipid, and they make up the cell membranes of living things. So these are the important ones for making up membranes of living things, and that's part of lipids, okay? The next group is proteins. Proteins made up of one or more chains of small molecules called amino acids. So these proteins are made up all these amino acids stuck together. They make enzymes and hormones. So these are very important for the processes in your body also. Okay. These include, we've got nuts and meats, and beans have lots of protein too, even though there's some carbs in them too, but beans you mostly consider protein. A lot of people nowadays too will get their protein in drinks, right? We've got the protein shakes and stuff. So somehow all important ways to get protein. Proteins are amino acids, which are monomers of proteins. There's only about 20 amino acids total, and it's the sequence or how these amino acids are put together that makes the shape. And then once you have that shape, the shape determines the function. Here are a few functions of proteins. They make up muscle tissue. So the muscle throughout your body are made up of proteins. It also helps to speed up chemical reactions in cells so things can get done quicker. Regulates life processes with hormones. And then it helps to defend against infections. Also, it transports materials in the blood. So these are some great functions from proteins that you should know these functions, okay? So star those in your notes. And then the last one is nucleic acid. Nucleic acids include RNA and DNA. So RNA, the R stands for ribonucleic. Okay, so the R is ribo, and the N is nucleic acid. Ribonucleic acid, and then DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, and they are the genetic material of the cell. It holds the blueprints for what that cell is going to turn into. Okay. Each nucleotide consists of a phosphate group, which contains phosphorus and oxygen, a sugar, which is deoxyribose in DNA and ribose in RNA. So the sugar is the D or the R. And then 1 or 4 nitrogen-containing bases. So these bases, if you remember from biology, we have adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Okay, so these will match up, except for in RNA that has the base of uracil instead of the thymine. So the other 3 bases are the same. So those are the bases in the DNA, and then RNA replaces uracil for thymine. And then how to remember what biochemical compound is made up of what. The carbs, I did it in the sequence we did our slides in. So we've got carbs, lipids, proteins, nucleic acid, and they kind of grow. So the carbs are CH and O, which is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Lipids are CHOs, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygens. Remember, it's just a matter of the different make of them. And then proteins are carbon, hydrogen, oxygens, nitrogens thrown in. And then the nucleic acid, you add on a phosphorus. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. So you can remember those of what's in each by cho, cho, chon, chomp. Okay. And then I do have 2 videos to show you. I haven't done this before to show the videos, and they didn't pull up. So I am going to put the videos, I'm going to put the 2 links on this, okay? So watch those videos. Explains a little bit more about what we just talked about. I love doing it in all different ways, so you can see it in the PowerPoints that I do, you can hear me talk about it, and then you can watch it in a video too. And the whole time you're doing this, especially hopefully you were going along and filling in your notes. I didn't say that at the beginning. You should have been filling in your notes as we were going along. I'll make sure I note that in directions when I put this on. So we'll get the hang of this. I'll get the hang of this. I'll get better too at reminding you why we're doing this in the first place. The reason I go over PowerPoints usually is that you're writing down notes somehow, and usually they are guided notes, so you just fill in certain words. Anytime you need to stop the video and fill something in or go back, that's the joy that you get for being able to do this at home. So hopefully that was really a quick, brief rundown of some chemistry and biology, and hopefully that was things that you remember. Or at least the words were familiar at all. And so these will be on our first test. So make sure you get your notes filled in. I will grade your notes when you come in to take the test. We'll figure that out later when it gets closer to testing time. So we won't need to worry about that for 2 weeks. So, okay, any questions, email me and we'll get this we'll get you guys keep going on these notes. I'll keep putting them up this week because we're going to go through the review part of this stuff pretty fast. Okay, love you guys. See ya. If I can figure out how to turn this off.